Welcome to Deal Shredders. We are your hosts, David and Greg.
We are local Nashville investors, cash buyers, and real estate agents who love to analyze your deals.
Well, guys, we're a few minutes late today, but if you're tuning in, we appreciate it. I am here with well-renowned investor Mike Brady. If y'all don't know who he is, you should definitely reach out, create a relationship. Mike is an investor in 5 different states. He's invested in Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, Alabama, and Ohio. He owns a title company. He owns a private equity fund that does lending for rehabs, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but for fix and flip, the BRRRR method stuff we're going to talk about today. He has personally rehabbed and flipped how many properties?
It's between my father and I, we're north of 200 at this point.
So a few guys. And then with the BRRRR method, you said in the last, 2 years, you've done 20?
We've got 28 doors between Ohio and Alabama.
Wow. And then you flipped your first property when?
I flipped my first property on an owner finance deal while I was still in college in 1999.
So you've been doing this for over 20 years.
I've been in real estate my whole career. I've done everything from commercial property management to big commercial restoration projects on high rises in Dallas.
And then now you're doing some land development, right?
Yeah, we've got a project going with a couple partners up in Springfield. It's a 34 build, and then we've got a couple other projects that are in the pipe. So we'll have about 200 to 250 pad sites underway within the next 12 months.
So guys, if you don't know Mike, you should definitely check him out, reach out. So today specifically, we're going to talk about what's called the BRRRR method. If you don't know what that is, it's a technique where you buy a piece of property with the intent to fix it up and rent it out and keep it for the cash flow. Is that basically kind of the gist of it? So BRRRR basically stands for, it's an acronym, buy, and then you're going to rehab the property, and then you're going to rent it out and get it stabilized, and then you're going to refinance it with maybe bank money or non-traditional lenders like Mike. And then once you get all that stuff done, you're going to try to pull out the money that you put in the deal and then use that to go out and rinse and repeat and recycle that money into another deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk to me about like that process. So you said you've done 28 in the last year and a half or 2 years.
Last couple of years, yeah. So we started buying down in Birmingham, Alabama, and so when I'm looking at buying a house, these are all single family. I have one quadruplex. I really like the quad. And I'd like to get more into some of the bigger door counts per structure, multifamily, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. But
is that because of management? Like it's just a little easier to manage, or?
Yeah, it's easier to manage. Repairs seem to be lower. The tenants seem to be happier because utilities are lower.
Kind of shared cost across the board stuff.
Yeah, so there's just little things like that that I think tend to be better. Originally, when I started, though, I was anti-multifamily. The reason I was anti-multifamily when I started is because when you have multifamily, there's only one exit strategy,
right?
To sell it to another investor,
right?
And
or
investors
refinance and I guess pull out your equity.
Well, but that's not an exit strategy.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So, and investors, all of us want to pay a discount,
right?
And so when I sell my multifamily, I can't sell that at retail. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's going to appreciate, but and houses, I always felt like if I had a bad egg, I could fix that one up, sell it, I could dump it. It wouldn't hurt my portfolio to have to take a hit on one house.
Right.
And then also with multifamily, like you get a bad egg in a multifamily building,
it hurts a lot.
Hurt a whole building. So originally, that's why we decided to go after single family instead of multifamily. So we buy typically in C and D neighborhoods.
So can we explain that? Because if y'all are listening, you don't have rental properties. Like you can make a lot of money with rental properties, but there's lots of different classes and there's different types of rents. We have commercial leases, we have residential, and even with residential, we have Airbnb stuff that people do in Nashville. And then you have more long-term leases. You say you're in a C and D. Kind of explain that. What's that mean?
So, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in my portfolio might rent for $800 to $900.
So it's a
lower class. Yeah, it's going to be a working class type tenant. Average household income for my tenants is probably about $40,000 to $45,000.
So you're not making a lot of money probably on appreciation in these areas.
These houses will appreciate, and one of the reasons we chose this area is I personally feel like Birmingham, Alabama is one of the last large metropolitan areas that will gentrify. It's already started in Birmingham. A couple of the neighborhoods that I bought in that I literally paid $5,000 for a house and would be all in for under $20,000 on a house. There are retail sales on that street now that are going 120, 130,000. So
you're buying for 20 cents on the dollar almost.
I was.
Yeah.
It can't. Now, that same house, I could probably sell that house as is right now for $45,000, $50,000 without doing anything to it. So appreciation is happening in that market, and it's what we were kind of counting on. Some of my neighborhoods will be slower to appreciate than others, but eventually we do feel strongly that in that market, this is our retirement plan, right? This is not today's money. This is tomorrow's money. And so you want to try to plan for something you can get into today that is going to be strong tomorrow.
Right.
And just about any market's going to appreciate some.
Hopefully.
So take Nashville, for example, where we are. And, Nashville's going to appreciate it.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt about it. The city is exploding. It's growing. And so even if you decide, you're like, Mike, how do I get started in this? I've got a corporate job. I don't know what I'm doing. I would recommend looking into an A-class property for your first one. It's harder to screw up. Your tenants are going to be more likely to pay. You're less likely to get like a complete trash out. Tenant just destroys the property.
Right. But more likely in those situations, you're probably bringing more money to the table to close, unless you're buying at great numbers.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you get lucky and you buy an A-class property at B or C-class pricing, then yeah, you can do the BRRRR method with leaving no money in the deal. Right. That's the biggest challenge in the BRRRR method is trying to figure out, do I want to leave 10, 15, 20, even $50,000 in each deal that I do? Do I have that capital and the ability to do it? And so when you start off, you got to look at what your resources are. Right. So if you want to start immediately and you're like, this is all I have, you're going to have to hunt for that deal.
Right. So if you got 10, 20 grand, it's going to be like, let's say we have somebody listening that doesn't have any rentals. They want to buy a house. They want to do the BRRRR method. They haven't done any investing, but they got less than 25 grand to play with. What would be your thoughts? Is that possible? Is it something they can do?
It is absolutely possible. So if you've got, let's use that $25,000 number. If you've got $25,000 to start with, you're going to be looking at tertiary markets. So a primary market might be Nashville. Secondary market might be, let's say, Murfreesboro.
Columbia.
Tertiary market's going to be Columbia.
Right.
Tertiary market's going to be Lewisburg, Lawrenceburg. Clarksville was a tertiary. I would kind of consider that more of a secondary now.
Yes, transition over the last year.
Exactly. But you go across the border into Kentucky, those are going to be tertiary markets. So you're looking at places where population's smaller, the velocity of real estate is lower, so days on market is going to be higher. And you can pick through deals with less competition to find the right one for your first deal. So I would say you want to start geographically as close to you as you can afford.
Right. So you can manage or keep your eye on that property, that asset.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody's got 25 grand. They're looking at those tertiary markets and they think they find a property that they can do something with. How should they be analyzing? Like, what are you considering when you're looking at a deal and saying, hey, this is something that we could actually buy, we could rehab, let's rent it out, and then we'll get to the refinance stuff later and figure that out. Like, what are those initial metrics that you're looking at?
So the most simple formula that you're going to use is income minus expenses equals cash flow, right? It's as simple as that. There's really nothing else.
Income just being the rent.
The rent, right? And
on a monthly basis or on an annual basis? I guess
the cash flows either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what you don't always understand when you're doing your first one is what are your expenses going to be? Right. So your first key is to find your lender that you're going to want to use for your refinance. We are a non-bank lender, so our rates are a little bit higher, but we're much easier to get.
Yeah, it's like anything. If something's easier, it's usually more expensive.
Exactly. You can talk to banks. I don't know any banks that are doing cash out refinances right now.
And if you don't have experience with doing kind of real estate stuff, or if you don't have a strong normal job with like some money to play with,
income,
if you're not making good W-2 income, banks aren't not going to talk to you just because like your liability is probably with your mortgage and everything else. Like you're not making a ton of money to offset that. So you're going to want to look at other creative lending opportunities. And with that being said, you're also going to want to buy at deeper margins to cover those extra costs.
Yeah. So when I got started, I walked into a bank thinking I was a big real estate investor. You know, I've got 1099 income. I'm strong. They're going to love me. They laughed me out of the room.
Yeah.
And so
we did the same thing 3 years ago.
pretty well determined. I was like, screw you banks.
Yeah.
I'm going to go find my own way. And that's how I actually became a lender. It was that meeting right there changed my life forever, because I went out and I met everybody I could that owned a private equity fund, that worked for a securitized fund. I joined every association that I could, and I became a lender. And through that, my business has grown considerably. So now we can do your acquisition, we can do your rehab, and then we can do your refinance for you, all under one roof.
And you get tons of people bringing you deals all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting a good pulse on the market, what's going on, because people are bringing you stuff and saying, hey, yo, Mike, check this out. Is this a deal? What do you see? So you're always having to be in touch with what's going on in this area or this market or wherever you're lending.
Yeah. So yeah, that pulse is definitely important for underwriting.
So
let's get back to our example. So at $25,000, let's say you've found a house and you need to figure out what your cash flow is going to be.
Right.
So I use a 4 net method. Everyone has their own method, and this is not necessarily the way you need to do it. But if you want to grab a pen and paper and write this down, this is a good place to start, right? So when I'm talking about my expenses, I'm going to do, you can always go and figure out what your mortgage expense is going to be, right? You just need your mortgage terms. And I use Carl's Mortgage Calculator. It's a free app on the Play Store and on iTunes or however Apple people get their apps. But you enter that information in there and you're going to get your monthly expense. So plug that in, right?
And that just covers your mortgage, interest and principal. That's not covering property taxes or your insurance, I'm assuming, in that app. Like, if you don't know the breakdown of this, we can talk about it another time, but ultimately, like, there's 4 factors, PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. So now you have just your principal and interest. You need to go figure out what your local taxes are, and you need to figure out what your property insurance is, because that's going to be, I'm assuming, one of the things that you take into account for.
Absolutely, yeah. So taxes and insurance are going to be netted out of your monthly revenue. And then I use 4 additional kind of fixed costs that I plan for. So property management's one of them. My property manager charges me 7%.
7% of the gross revenue,
gross
right?
rent rate, correct.
Right. So if it's $1,000 a month in rent, they're charging you $70 a month to manage that property. What does that management usually cover? Like just making sure that crap goes wrong and they're there to fix this, so you're not getting calls? Or
So yeah, they're taking care of collections for me. They're taking care of lease ups. They're taking care of lease renewals.
Okay.
And then when for my portfolio, when a repair comes in, I actually have a crew down in Birmingham, so they just send me the repair request and I deploy my crew. Saves me 15 to 35% on each service call.
right, because they have a management fee on repairs, like most property management.
And they don't care about necessarily getting the work done for a good price.
No, they just
they care about making the job easy.
Right. They make one phone call to Jimmy, hey buddy, go fix this, and he sends a bill over. And
Which I certainly can't fault them for, but I can be a little bit more frugal than they can. So I do my own repairs.
As we should be, because ultimately, like, it's our bottom line. We put that money away or it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
7% for property management.
Cool.
I generally use 7% for taxes and insurance, but you need to check your local market. Like if you're in Texas, it's more like 15%, I think. So you just need to know your numbers there.
All of which the taxes will be public information, so you can find that without having to like do a bunch of extra stuff. You should be able to find that locally with the assessor's website or something of that nature. Or Zillow or Redfin a lot of times have like old taxes, so
they sure do. Yeah,
usually it's fairly easy to find.
Pretty easy. And then I do an additional 7% for vacancy. So that's an escrow account that I build.
If somebody
for vacancy when somebody moves out.
Okay.
And then I do 7% for repair. So we just kind of escrow that 7% of the total rent rate for repairs.
So we have 7% for property taxes and insurance, 7% for property management, 7% for vacancy, and 7% for repairs. So all of that, if my math is right, is 28% roughly. And you back that out of whatever your monthly rent is. And then that's, let's do simple math. $1,000 rent, if we're backing out those four numbers at 28% would be $280. So now we're making $720 a month.
Before mortgage.
Before mortgage.
Principal and interest.
So now, how are you assessing, your cost of money or your mortgage and whatnot, and when is that worth the cash flow that you make, in comparison?
So after I calculate, hold on just a second. My dad's trying to get into Top Golf here, and I have to text him something.
You're good. So guys, if you haven't been following, so we got rent, and we backed out 28% of costs, property taxes, property management, then repairs, if something goes wrong with the property, and then we have escrow account for vacancy. If somebody leaves and we have a month of vacancy, over the course of the year, we saved up 7% of our funds to cover that, so it's not just
So
a
we can cover our
wash.
mortgage.
Right, so we can pay and not be bleeding money on a monthly basis.
And some people additionally want to pull out a CapEx reserve as well.
So CapEx, let's explain that, capital expenses.
Right, so replacing roofs, replacing air conditioners, turning a property after a tenant moves out. My turns typically cost me about $1,800. That's touch up paint, clean the carpets.
Right. So depending on what your rent is, that could be a moving figure. That can be a few percent per month, or it can be a lot depending on, because something to consider with the BRRRR method, when you rehab the property, depending on how good a buy you get, you're hopefully trying to remove as many capital expenses as possible on the front end so that your cash flow is not affected on the back end, or it has the minimum amount of effect so that way you can put more money in your pocket.
Let's touch on that real quick because as a general rule, I always look at trying to make the amount of repairs so like if I think the roof is going to go down in 5 years and I'm doing 7-year notes, I'm going to go ahead and replace the roof when I buy it.
Right, because you can get that financed.
Yeah, if I think the roof's got 10 years on it, when I go and do my refinance again in 7 years, then I'll do the roof at that point in time. So we try to take care of all the systems: the roof, the air conditioning, the plumbing, the electrical, the foundation, any other structural issues, windows, insulation, kitchens, bathrooms, all that stuff. Anything that we feel like may not make it through the life of the loan, we go ahead and fix.
That way, ultimately, you don't have to dig into your piggy bank later to do extra repairs that you could have just done on the front end. So that way your cash flow on a monthly basis is locked in, hopefully, knock on wood.
But it still happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Inevitably.
That's business. Things always go wrong, but ultimately that is continuing to make you money. And then you're putting a little bit of money aside in case something goes wrong. But that way your pro forma, for the most part, is unaffected.
So I do 15-year amortization schedules on all of my rentals on 7-year notes. So my goal is to have when the 7 years is up and my notes are called, a third of the principal balance of that loan is going to be paid off. My goal is to have enough equity in my portfolio to sell half of it, pay off the other half, and have
however many free and clear.
My goal is 20 free and clear houses by the time it's all said and done.
So then at that point, if you haven't been following, because that was a lot of high level stuff, that's fantastic. So you want to have 40 units that you have amortized, like your loans on a 15-year, but with a 7-year call period. Basically.
Right, so the loan's only 7 years long, and so there's a balloon at the end of 7 years where you have to pay the remaining principal balance or refinance the loan again.
So basically the interest rate, the amount of interest you're paying on a monthly basis is calculated on a loan being 15 years, but the loan term only lasts 7 years. So what ends up happening is you pay a little bit less interest because it's a 15-year amortization instead of a 30-year, just the way it breaks down without going into all the math.
You pay more principal. It's the interest rates.
Yeah, exactly. The offset of the principal and interest. And then after 7 years, when you're getting close to when that note's called, like, hey, you got to pay it off, you're hoping to sell 20 of those units and get the equity from the 20 years of or 7 years of rent, plus maybe some appreciation, and use that to then pay the other 20 units off free and clear and have those 20 units that are then cash flowing like crazy. Cool. So then what the question that I have is, Okay.
But let me touch on this real quick, because one of the reasons I brought up my amortization schedule is because my monthly payment is higher than if you have a longer amortization schedule.
Right.
Okay. And so when I do my calculation, going back to our initial question of how you evaluate a deal, when I evaluate an individual house, once I net out all of my expenses, if I'm still going to make $200 a month, I buy the house.
So that's your rule of thumb.
That's my rule of thumb. I
But
don't
that's
really
based
care
on
beyond that.
but that's based on a 15-year amortization.
Right.
Where if it was a 30-year amortization,
I would need to make at least $300 a month for it to make sense.
Right.
Because I'm probably paying an extra $100 a month
in interest.
Principal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I see what you're saying.
But that's in my market in Birmingham. And then my general rule of thumb when I'm buying in a D neighborhood, I'm at like 45 to 50 times the monthly rent. So if rent's $1,000 a month, I'm going to be all in on that house for purchase, closing costs, repairs, stabilization, everything for under $50,000.
So rent times 45 to 50. That's your
That's
quick,
easy,
dirty rule of thumb. If the numbers are anywhere close, hey, let's talk.
And because of that, like I had a portfolio come across my desk yesterday, 16 units. And in less than 3 minutes, I shot an offer off. Offer was $200,000 less than they were asking, but I make an offer on everything.
Right.
They came back to me and said they took an offer.
So he bought 16 doors yesterday, guys, or locked up 16 doors.
Locked them up. I haven't seen him yet. It's all subject to inspection.
Right.
And I paid 32% below asking price.
Right. But
because I took the time to make an offer. And I made an offer on my terms. You don't make an offer on their terms.
Well, and that's the thing that like people don't realize in investing. Deals happen every single day, and there's a plethora of deals out there in the market. You have to be willing to know what your buying criteria is and then make offers. If you make offers, you'll find deals, but you just have to know how to make calculated offers where you can protect, yourself and also cash flow. Because ultimately, you make all your money on the buy.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy wrong, you cannot fix it later.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. Which is why if you're a beginner and you're starting out, I recommend if you have the ability to buy an A-class property, because it helps remove some of those mistakes that you're inevitably going to make, because the appreciation is going to happen on an A-property.
Cool. So we've only hit the first part. So we're kind of so now we found a deal that we bought based on your criteria, backing out the 28% and cash flowing at least $200 plus on a 15-year.
Yeah, that's on mine. But
that's what yours is. But at that point, cool, I'm going to buy this property. The next step of the BRRRR method is we're going to rehab this property. So
let's talk about financing the acquisition. So real quick, if you're not buying with a bank, give me a call. We're doing 100% financing on acquisitions for this stuff right now. As long as you're a qualified borrower, we'd be happy to help you out with your financing on rentals or those flips. So got that piece out of the way. So now we're going to talk about rehab.
Okay, so but this is also going to be talking to you as well, because if they want to rehab a property, you have, like you're the lender who's doing the fix and flip stuff, loans. When we're calculating our all-in price for the purchase plus the rehab, we just went over the formula of what you're saying. But now at this point, you're hiring somebody out to come in and just take care of the construction stuff, or y'all handling
so
that?
my crews take care of my rehabs for me. I've got a couple different crews I cycle through. It's important to always have a backup for every trade, no matter what.
Yep.
Do not ever depend on one individual contractor, because you will end up paying too much.
Or you'll spend way too much time and then pay the lender way too much. So either way, you spend too much.
Absolutely. One of my dad's favorite sayings is interest never sleeps. If your property's sitting and not getting work done, man, you're burning money every day. And you should understand what your daily hold rate. Like our daily hold rate here in Nashville per property is somewhere around $170.
Yeah.
It's $170 we spend a day in taxes, insurance, utilities, and interest.
Yeah, same. And then you start thinking, oh man, I got 6 properties going, so that means every day I'm burning about $1,000. You start being like, man, I got to be on this, because if not, you don't feel it immediately. You feel it in the back end when you sell the property. Like, man, we didn't really make that much money.
Yeah.
Well, you were on the property for an extra 3 months. That hurt, So
hurts a lot.
So okay, you find contractors, they rehab the property. You've done that. At this point, you're renting. I guess it depends on the lender, because some people will need to put a renter in, or not renter, the lender. Some people need to put a renter in and stabilize the property in order to do the last step, the refinance. But then some people.
Almost every lender today, post-COVID, post-pandemic, in our current recession situation, whatever you want to call it, almost every lender out there, in fact, I don't know a single one that will lend to you on a stabilized loan, so a long-term loan without a tenant in the property. So you're gonna have to tenant that property.
So you bought it, you've rehabbed it, go put a tenant in it and find a good one.
Let your property manager do it if you're not experienced in it. They have the ability to pull background checks, credit scores, do all of the review of their current employer, all that kind of stuff. And if you don't have a good rule of thumb, there are lots of free resources on the web. Just look, how do I choose a tenant? Google that, and you're going to see all kind of great stuff. Don't pay for any of it. Find the stuff that's free, and that'll, if you're going to tenant it yourself, make sure you arm yourself with information, because a bad tenant can completely destroy all of your work and your investment.
So then they put in the tenant. What are most lenders like yourself looking to see from a seasoning period? A seasoning period being the time that the renter is in the property, so the property can season or stabilize from a cash flow basis before you're willing to put long-term capital and lock that up and do that.
I mean, we have no seasoning loans. They're not very attractive. So the general rule of thumb is you want that tenant in the property about 90 days before you finish your refinance. So the appraisal can get ordered before then, but the closing won't. The other thing to remember is don't apply for your refinance loan until you're completely finished with the rehab and you have a tenant in it, because if you're still working on stuff, the appraiser is going to come out and they're going to give you a lower valuation on your property because he's going to appraise that as is. For those of you that don't know the difference between as is or subject to appraisal, as is just like it sounds. That house appraises like this as it sits. A subject to appraisal, an appraisal will come in and say, well, based on this list of repairs you've given me, this is what the house will be worth subject to those repairs. A lot of people call that ARV, or after repair value. In the appraisal world, it's called subject to appraisal.
Yeah. And then if you do a subject to appraisal, you have to have the appraiser come back out once you finish the work to verify all the stuff that's been done, subject to the improvements, so the bank can then underwrite that loan based on that evaluation. So it's beneficial. I've done a lot of subject twos, more so with refis on personal properties and things of that nature, but it's a little bit more complicated. So if you can get all the work done and have it done, do it. It'll make your life a little easier. So then at that point, they start the refinance process, get all the paperwork submitted, whether it's with a bank or with yourself. Let's talk about that a little bit. So
we actually, I have new terms as of today. So I'll go through this real quick because this is
super valuable.
These are some really good numbers compared to what we've been seeing in April and May. So we're back with cash out refinances. It's going to be a 5, 7, or 10-year interest-only period. After that, it converts to an adjustable rate mortgage. Rates are going to be between 7.5% and 8.25%. So as like 3 weeks ago, that was at 9%. So rates are already starting to come down post-COVID. More lenders are starting to open up as the security markets are starting to unfreeze. So maximum, if you're going to buy on a long-term note, you're going to have to put 25% down. But if you're doing a refinance, we'll go up to 75% loan to value. Okay. So what that means is
so no longer 80. 80
is gone. 80 is gone. 80 will be back next year.
Yeah. But it was pre-COVID, but definitely not now.
Well, definitely not now. 75% is about the best you're going to find out there right now. In fact, most lenders are still at 65 or 70% loan to value. So whatever your house appraises for with that tenant in it, your max loan is going to be 75% of that number.
So what that means, guys, is when you're doing your calculations for your cash flow, like Mike was talking about, that's fantastic. But if you're trying to do the BRRRR method and refinance all your money out, where you have no money in the deal and your cash on cash return is infinite, your total cost of everything, your purchase, any fees for purchasing it, your rehab, your holding costs, any fees to the long-term lender who's putting the loan in place, and everything cannot be more than 75%. Otherwise, you're going to have some of your money, or whoever's money, however you structure that, in that deal. And you're going to have to figure out how to either get it out or leave it there and park it until you refinance later or sell the property down the road.
So we talked at the beginning of this segment about how to decide how much money to leave in. And Dave just used one of my favorite phrases, infinite cash on cash return. I mean, that sounds so cool. But if you've got $0 invested in something and you make $2 on it, that is infinite cash on cash return. So it's not necessarily a great return, but since it's none of your money in it, right, your return is infinite. So It's important to understand cash on cash return. Cap rates don't apply here. Do not use cap rates when you evaluate. You want to use ROI, cash on cash. And your cash on cash return is just simply how much money did you put into that project and do you have to leave into that project? And you divide it by how much money you make per year on that project.
The net, basically.
The net.
So if you're using the analogy from earlier, we had $1,000 rents and we back out to 28% for all the fees and stuff. So now we're down to $720 a month and we back out our mortgage. Let's say our mortgage was $520 for easy math. So we're putting away $200 a month or $2,400 over the course of a year. So if you have, you know, let's say you had,
yeah, let's say like some of mine, a couple of mine, I've got like $5,000 I had to leave in the project, right? So let's say we left $5,000 in the project and we've got $2,400
you
cash.
almost have a 50% return.
It's about a 50% return on your investment.
Which would be like going to the bank and saying, hey, can I give you my money? And you give me 50% of my money.
Yeah, let me give you $1,000. I want $1,500 back at the end of the year.
And they're going to laugh at you because they'll say, we'll do 0.001%.
Yeah. So everybody brags about how they've got their infinite cash on cash return in place, right? But that infinite cash on cash return is not necessarily the best thing for every individual. If you've got money sitting in an IRA, if you've got money sitting in a savings account, not really doing anything for you, just earning crap interest at the bank, invest it in a piece of real estate and get that cash on cash return. Anything over 20%, I'd say is great.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're getting a 20% cash on cash return, and
you're getting, and you're putting money in your pocket every single, I know that's calculated into that return, but you're increasing, you're decreasing your monthly overhead basically with that cash.
Exactly.
Instead of it just sitting in a bank account and literally doing nothing for you. It's not moving. I've learned that money does one of two things. It's either growing in value or it's decreasing in value. If it's parked somewhere, it's decreasing in value. If you don't realize that,
outpacing it.
Yeah. If you don't realize that, then you're not even in the game.
Right.
Cool. So you were saying 75%. Any other terms that you want to go over with
so 5, 7, 10-year interest only, 7.5 to 8.25% for your rate, and that's fixed during that 5, 7, or 10-year period. Max 75% LTV.
Up to 100% of cost, right?
Up to 100% cost, right? So if you want to do cash out, if you bought a deal real deep and you want to walk away from closing table with cash, we're going to be max at 70%.
Gotcha.
But we'll finance out your current loan up to 75%.
Cool.
Closing in 10 to 14 days, and then we can go up to 50 million in value. So multifamily works for this. We even have a build and hold product right now. So if you wanted to, say you're in Columbia. And you buy 2 acres that you can put 8 houses on, we can finance that construction and the refinance for you.
Cool. That's fantastic. So you touched on something earlier that maybe I want to give a little bit more information, and then we'll see if we have any questions. You touched on what a qualified buyer, or not buyer, but a borrower.
Yeah.
Can you explain that for somebody who maybe has never borrowed any money from a hard money lender or a private equity fund or anything like that? What does that mean?
So in today's world, we're going to call it post-COVID. In today's world, a qualified borrower is going to have a minimum FICO score of 650. Okay, a well-qualified borrower is going to have a credit score above 700 in order to get the best rates. They're going to have completed at least 2 previous deals in the last 12 months. Okay. So if you're a beginner, you're going to get the worst rates, right?
Regardless, because you pay to play, guys. That's how it is.
And even then, sometimes you're going to have to bring in a partner. So if you're a beginner in this, and cousin Uncle Billy has done 15 flips, bring him in as a partner on your first deal. Be like, hey, Billy, I got this money sitting in a bank account. You've got experience. Let's do this first house together so that I can understand how to do it and I can get experience under my belt. Do a separate LLC just with him on that one property. Hopefully it goes smoothly for you. Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't. But you're going to learn a lot, and then you'll be a well-qualified borrower after that deal.
Speaking of, don't you still have the program where you're doing, the opinion on, or not really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had a kind of a mentoring beginner program back, last year, but that's not really right.
Cool. Well, let's see if we got any questions. Let's jump on the good old Facebook. So we got a few comments. Great info, guys. Oh, cool. So it doesn't look like we have any questions.
Easy enough.
I don't think we do. Well, guys, if you do have any questions, how can they get a hold
Yeah,
of you?
so the easiest way to get me is to shoot me an email. So my email address is mbrady, BRADY, at propertyrecycle.com.
Cool. And I'll drop that in the comment, guys, so you have it.
Our website is www.propertyrecycle.com. You can apply there. You can find more information about our loans. And if you are a seasoned or a beginning investor, I highly recommend our title office, Toro Title. Our attorney, Matt Anderson here.
Where we're at right now.
Yeah, we're in the closing office right now. Our attorney here is the only attorney in town that I'm aware of that is a title office and also has experience litigating on behalf of real estate investors in Nashville. So
specifically with construction, guys. So if you're like, how do I deal with contractors and how can I protect myself? He's a wealth of knowledge. I legitimately think he knows his stuff.
We take real good care of our clients here. So hopefully you'll decide to try Toro Title out. And if you got any questions, guys, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me via email. You can. I'm a member of Deal Shredders. You can post questions here, and I can get back to them. Yeah. I'm happy to help. And then I also have a monthly meetup called Deal Makers.
Oh, that's right.
It's been so long since we've done it with COVID. I almost
Tuesdays, right?
First Tuesday of the month here at the title office.
We start back up in July?
Oh, yeah, we're going to start back up in July.
Yes. Love it.
And I think we're going to be talking about deal valuation post-COVID. It's going to be our topic. So if you want to come learn how to find deals, how to evaluate deals in this economy, then come check us out first Tuesday of the month at Toro Title. We're going to start at, when does that thing even start? It starts at 3 p.m.
Yeah, it's afternoon. Like I think we were doing like 3 to 5-ish or something.
Yeah, 3 to 5.
I just had a lunch yesterday with a buddy and I was telling him, because he's wanting to get in real estate, I said, in my opinion, the most valuable skill set that you can learn when you're first getting started is how to evaluate properties properly. If you can't figure out what a property is worth, nothing else matters, because you'll have problems with lending, you'll have problems with what you're offering. Like the next part is figuring out rehab, but you have to figure out what it's worth.
It brings up a really good, I've got a kind of project that we've been working on. We've got a really cool valuation tool coming out for our clients.
Cool.
That you'll be able to walk into a property, estimate construction, pull comps. I mean,
all that.
It's really cool. It's going to be really affordable too.
What, maybe in the next 60, 90 days?
Definitely within the next 60. Yeah, I'm hoping to launch it for deal makers.
Cool. So guys, remember that. Reach out to mbrady@propertyrecycle.com. I'll put the email in the comments. And then if you have any questions or anything, reach out to him or reach out to us at Deal Shredders. We would love to talk about more deals. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for giving us a few minutes here Friday. Y'all enjoy the weekend. We'll be in touch, guys.
Thanks a ton, guys. Bye.